if you're talking to a company, try doing some user interviews with people who haven't adopted that product yet, but are the ICP. You can ask in your early conversations with the recruiter or with the founder, hey, what's an ICP that you're curious about, but you're not sure is locked in? This is an innocuous question. They'll probably answer it without a second thought. But what you do with that information is what counts. Not just for the interview process, because you can probably make it through regardless. Product people are classically good at talking and thinking on their feet. So you will do well in the interviews because that's what you get practice at all the time. But to know for sure what your prospects are with this company, whether you can take it personally to the degree you need to in order to take a load off the founder and earn their trust, go do 10 user interviews. And if by the end you're excited, great. And you'll have amazing material and an incredible proof point to share in your interviews with that founder. If you are bored, do not continue, because this is your life in the good case. And if you can't get into it, it's not for you.
Welcome to another episode of Super Insider. In this episode, Ben and I are joined by Diana Berlin, a partner at Matrix Ventures who invests in early stage B2B SaaS and AI companies from concept to Series A. Diana also sits on the boards of Accord and Meshcapade. And prior to becoming an investor, Diana spent 5 years at Quip, working her way up from second PM all the way to VP of product. And one of the coolest things she did there is she led the product integration into Salesforce post-acquisition. And before Quip, Diana held a couple of product roles at SoundCloud and Microsoft.
Our conversation with Diana covered a lot of ground, including her path from a liberal arts major to product management and investing, and why she loves a liberal arts background for people getting into these career paths, how writing online publicly has benefited Diana, and why she encourages people to be more open with sharing their thinking online, and even goes into tips for leaders and CEOs to encourage their teams to write more online, why it's beneficial to them to do so. Diana shared when she thinks companies should hire their first product manager. It's a topic that we love covering in the pod. And we went deep on what makes the best relationships between CEOs and product executives from Diana's experience, and even some tips for product leaders that are thinking about how to gauge that fit with CEOs before they accept new roles. Covered a lot more ground. Diana is an extremely intentional thinker, investor, and product leader, and we know you're going to love this conversation. Thanks for listening.
We're live. Diana, so good to see you here. Thanks so much for making the time and joining Ben and I. The first topic that I'm excited to discuss today is the role that your liberal arts education played in your career, since I know it's a topic that you're very passionate about. And maybe more specifically, how did your history degree prepare you for a career in product?
Yeah, for sure. I am unusual, but not alone in coming into my product career with a liberal arts background. This is something that I see often enough that there's like a little club of us, and I'm able to host events for product people with liberal arts backgrounds, but not so many that it's everyone, the majority, or even 10%. I mean, I feel like it's maybe 5% or fewer come from a liberal arts background in product. And so it's a big topic of passion for me, both because I believe that understanding all the pathways open to us in a career is what enables good decisions. And certainly when I was graduating college with a history degree, there was nothing telling me that I could be or might like being a product manager. Those were just two separate worlds. And I think the world's gotten a little smarter about that. And also this generation is a little better about knowing their options from being very online, but it's still something that I think bears repeating, because so often in a career, you're influenced by your role models. And certainly in my history degree, I was very in awe of the history professors that I studied with, and I didn't have ready role models available for product careers. And that's something that I always like to make sure people know their options on and know that it's hard, but it's possible to break in. But then there's also the dimension about what a liberal arts background does for a career in product, what it unlocks, what perspective it might give you that it might not give everyone. And for me, that really comes down to a combination of lateral thinking and a love of primary source material. In my history education and in my research that I did on World's Fairs and the history of technology, my favorite thing was to go to the library and find these pamphlets from the past or go to a used bookstore and find books with inscriptions in them from long ago. And long ago didn't have to be that long ago. I focused on the history of the 20th century. So some might call that the very near history, the very recent past. But for me, it was still so special to see these artifacts of a time that was not our own and be able to extrapolate from that an entire world. What were things like at the time? What did people care about? What were they focused on? What were they unsure about? And to appreciate how over the course of the 20th century, that day to day changed every few years because of the pace of technological development. That also gave me perspective on understanding the present and understanding that we are in what will one day be history. And people will one day look at this moment in time of rapid progress in AI, rapid progress in robotics, rapid progress across a lot of fronts, and think, wow, they didn't even know it was coming, but they were there at the front lines. They were there with a front row seat to history. And so being able to toggle between those two perspectives gives me more appreciation for the present, but also I think a lot of practice in extrapolating from primary source material to an entire high integrity, cohesive worldview. And that's exactly what we have to do in product when we're extrapolating from one piece of user feedback and trying to understand how that relates to the overall spectrum of user needs, or what I do now as an investor at Matrix, where I'm extrapolating from the due diligence I'm able to do to a belief about what the future will look like and how rapid is this change? Is this change going to happen so quickly that an entire new market emerges? And just being able to pattern match on the past gives that a lot more grounding. I'd say just finally, it is a really cool tool for connecting across cultures and different people, because when you can find an artifact that you have in common that you both approached as students or fans, whether that's a novel or whether that's a film or whether that's a period in history, you can really get into the details together, and it's a prototype of how deep both people can go. So this is something that I love to do now when I'm talking with founders, not as trick question, but just as finding some common ground that we can both go deep on and that I can learn from them on and we can learn from each other on, so that we practice learning from each other on something that we both have knowledge on. So it's that matching of what do we both know something about and what can we teach each other on this thing that we both care about. And I think that's also relevant when you're in a high growth tech company and you're trying to grow the team rapidly. You need to find common ground that you both know something about, but where you both have something to teach each other, and approach those conversations centered around a shared artifact, whether that's a wireframe or whether that's debriefing on an interview you just did, or whether that's customer research that you're both looking at together side by side. So those are some of the motions that I find relevant from my background in liberal arts, but the list goes on. I'll just say that I wish more people broke into product from liberal arts, and that's a big focus of mine.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm also a big history fan, although much further back. I'm a prehistory nerd. But when you think about the 20th century and just like the history that you've studied, Diana, and you think about how, like you said, we are currently in the middle of a chapter, arguably in the beginning of a very interesting chapter of history that's being written right in front of us. And it's your job as an investor these days to think decades into the future sometimes, because if you're going to make an investment today, you're probably not planning on that liquidity event happening for 7 to 10 years if it does get to that point. And what I'm curious about is, how do you make that space today as an investor to take a step out of the day-to-day details, the coffee meetings, all the different news articles, to zoom out and maybe formulate your own perspective about where this chapter might be heading on the course of a decade?
Well, for me, it's all back to that kind of viewing the present as future history motion, where, of course, I get to connect with practitioners that are on the frontier every day. And that's a big part of my work as an investor. But there's also taking a step back and being more objective, and also being more synthetic about tying together different resources and being able to follow my own line of curiosity to get to the bottom of things. And I think it's that experience of feeling like you're getting to the bottom of things, you're getting to ground truth, that is always just one corner of the universe. But as long as that perspective has integrity and cohesion, and you have that feeling of having gotten to the bottom of something, now you have your own point of view that's hard won, unique from primary source material, that you can workshop with other practitioners who are on the front lines. And so It's that depth that I'm constantly striving for. And it takes a lot of different approaches to maintain depth when a lot of my job is also meeting people for the first time. And that's like a part of my job I treasure. That's not to be taken for granted. That's not in conflict with depth. One of my favorite things about being in venture is that when you talk to a founder about what they're building, this is their everything. There's family and friends, but then there's also their vision and how they're building toward it. And so it's instantly deep. There's no small talk with founders. You're talking about the thing that is most important to them that they want to see in the world. So that instant depth is just tantalizing and something that I look forward to every day. But I also need my own depth in order to be a good thought partner to them. And for me, that's all about reconnecting to the parts of my past where I've had the most depth. And for me, that's a lot about nostalgia for my student days and just simulating that as much as possible. I think everyone accesses depth in different ways, but just calling back to the point in your life when you touched depth most readily and then implementing those practices so you're touching depth so that you can be a peer to other people who are touching depth. That's how I see it. So just tactically for me, it looks like I have a weekly newsletter. I always start with a question about what I'm seeing in the present and where that started in the history of technology. And I go down a rabbit hole and I let myself fall down that rabbit hole for a few hours. And I come back with 5 excerpts that I highlight in my weekly newsletter, send it out on Mondays to a very small audience. But I love being able to send it out to anyone. First of all, it's a privilege that anyone cares at all. The purpose, it's all about perspective. It's all about saying, okay, how can I connect with other people who may serendipitously be exploring the depths of this topic that I'm thinking about right now as well? And how can I use that promise and exciting possibility of serendipity to motivate myself to access depth and go into the kind of primary source mines and find stuff that is surprising and interesting to me and come back out and share it.
Amazing. This is a perfect transition to another topic that I know you're very passionate about, which is the value of writing online and why everyone should write more. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on why do you think everyone should spend more time doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is also partly a way of making sure that I live up to this standard by constantly talking about it, because it's so easy to let writing and thinking slip away in any career, product career, certainly, when so much of your day to day is about being the heartbeat and keeping things moving. And deep thought and deep work can seem like, yeah, that would be nice, but when? But also in VC, where I have so much autonomy and really the luck of being able to design days to have a mix of conversations and research, and I must in order to make good decisions. But still, it's hard to do the things that we care about most and that feel most tender to us. And certainly expressing your thoughts and taking a stand is something that people come up with a lot of excuses not to do because it's vulnerable. And it also takes focus. And the combination of vulnerable and takes focus just makes it really easy to come up with a lot of reasons why it just can't happen. Part of what I stand for is you got to do it anyway. If this is anything that's meant something to you at any point in your life, there's a cost, an opportunity cost to every week, every month that goes by without you accessing that depth and that part of yourself that thinks deeply. And a lot of the time, people get really distracted by the different forms this could take. They think, I don't want to be a LinkedIn influencer. I don't want to be a celebrity. You probably won't be. Like, most people aren't. Most people don't ascend to those heights. And what would really be the payoff of that anyway? What can fame do for you as somebody building your product career? More than nothing, but it also comes at a cost. So I would just take fame out of the equation and remove that as a reason for or against any kind of writing and self-expression online. In my life, the best things that have come from researching and sharing my thoughts online have been those relationships that there's no way I would have come to otherwise. It's often other people who are experiencing their own depth, whether that's in building a product or starting a company or doing their own research inside the university or outside the university. And they don't have a lot of time for just random connections. And what would we talk about anyway if we got on a call just because I like meeting interesting people in interesting ways? Some people are open to that because they're also in the flow of trying to create their own luck. But there's plenty of people out there who are extraordinary, who are very heads down. And so in my life, the best way to connect with people who are heads down has been to go heads down myself and have something to talk about that is relevant to each of us in what we're heads down on. So probably some stories would help with this, but I just wanted to set the framework first.
Yeah, that's super helpful. One of the key benefits that you mentioned are the depth, the perspective, also the relationships. If a PM is listening to this from a product or a career perspective, how can it be also helpful to you? Is it getting the hiring manager to get a little bit more perspective on how you think, or yeah, what are other benefits if you're a PM listening to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share one story there, which is that there was a point in my career when I was desperate to get an interview at a specific company. And I'd just gone about it the wrong way. And I realized that, but it was too late to fix it. I felt like I'd applied through the website, and I guess my application had just gone into a pile, never to be reviewed because it was such a high growth company that they could just fill the seats on referrals. And I was also in a moment in my life when I was feeling a little too self conscious to ask favors of the friends I had who were at that company to refer me in. This was ridiculous. Do not be me. If you have a friend at a company that you want to work with, always talk to them. And that's clear to me now. But at the moment, I was, oh, I've been so bad at staying in touch. Like, I got to do something to show that I'm serious. I had the thought, which seemed almost whimsical at the time. I don't know if it'll work, but I do have probably 3,000 words of thoughts on this product category that are just in my head. And if I really put my mind to it, I could get it down on the page, but it's been so hard to make the time. And then I thought, okay, this might not work, but if I sit down and I write a few thousand words about this, then either it will lead nowhere, but I'll at least have written this thing that I meant to write anyway. Or something will happen, and I can't tell what, where somehow maybe it'll get to the team that I'm trying to reach, or maybe I'll be able to email them again, but it'll be more than a check-in. It'll be like, hey, I made this. I don't know if this is interesting to you, but I wrote this piece. You don't have to read it, but just it's there in case you're curious. And so it really felt to me like a last ditch effort, completely of my own construction. I was not at the end of the line, but I felt this huge pressure. And I see this a lot, by the way, with conscientious people who are so lovely to work with. And I just really want to help conscientious people get out of their own heads about how much they can ask for and what is really possible for them. If you've got the goods, a lot more is possible for you than you think. So anyway, but I had to find a way to convince myself that I was doing things the right way, where I was sharing original thoughts, I was putting in the work, I was showing I was serious. And so I sat down and I wrote these few thousand words. I published it, I think, on Medium at the time. That was the tool of the day. And I sent it to one person who I thought would find it relevant and might possibly post about it, no guarantee. And this was in the heyday of Twitter. So he did post about it, went viral. And not only did one person at the company I was interested in read it, hundreds of people read it. It went viral in their Slack team. And in the end, they reached out to me and I went through the whole interview process. I had the chance to join. I ultimately joined a startup instead, which is part of my sort of startup story. But what matters is that I got the opportunity. It worked out better than I could have dreamed because I was underrating what a differentiator original thought that you put out in public is. So few people do that. If you do it at all, you're a 1 in 100. And if it's good thinking, you're a 1 in 1,000. And if you know that you have those thoughts inside you, then the only thing standing between you and showing that you're 1 in 1,000 is sitting down and writing it.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think I've been writing for over a decade now, and not all of the posts have gone viral or anything, but sometimes you do strike a nerve by just sharing original thinking, and it feels so good to know that you're not alone, or that you maybe have been able to pinpoint something that other people are thinking, but no one's actually found the words to say yet. And it's not just like good for your ego, but it's just good for your like mental health to feel like I'm not crazy, like I'm seeing something
Right.
that other people see too. So
Exactly. Yeah. And I really have this kind of success metric of one good conversation coming of each piece I write that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's not that hard to get one conversation to come out of it. I also think that so many people believe they have to be a world expert for it to make sense for them to express their thoughts at all. Not true. There's so many ways you can add value, even just by sharing your own personal experience of technology, both because no one else has your experience. So you can write about it and know that you'll be sharing something original because you're one of a kind. But also because, especially if you're writing about a product built by companies that aren't gargantuan, you may be the only person doing that. They may be trying to get attention any way they can. And what an artifact for a Series A startup to be able to share around, that somebody who's super high potential early in their career took the time to say, out of all the products that I could have written about, this is the one that was most interesting to me, and here's why. You can bet it's going to be shared too in their newsletter, in their social media profiles. It'll be shared around their Slack. They'll share it to their investors. Even if you're one of 50 people doing this, that's still only one a week. So just think about the artifact that you're creating and the role that plays in someone else's life. And it doesn't have to be something that is going to make the New York Times bestseller list for it to make a difference to someone else. And by making a difference to someone else, it gives them more chances to make a difference for you.
Totally agreed. That's really well said. I would love to transition to talking a little bit about working with founders if you're game, because I think you're in a really interesting position to work with founders. A lot of the folks that might be listening to this, folks in the super community, work with founders from a different perspective as product leaders and folks that are working with founders on their teams. Sometimes when just connecting the dots to writing, a lot of the time when you write something, maybe it's just your way of distilling something, or at least that's how it is for me, that you find yourself repeating a lot. And at some point, you're just like, maybe I'll just write about this so it can get a broader distribution. Is there any advice that you find yourself repeating a lot to founders these days that maybe has recently started connecting in your head that might be more valuable for people to know in April 2024?
The advice about writing applies to founders as well. I think that often super technical founders will think that's the value they provide, and their personal story has no value or isn't interesting or is something that it would feel weird and against their personality to share. But personal stories are what people connect with. It's what future investors connect with. And it's also what future members of your team will connect with. And so if you haven't yet shared your personal story as a founder, your journey, your origin story from where you started and the lifelong interests that have carried you through to what you're building now, you're missing out on some of the highest value relationships that are available to you, because you never know who that personal story is going to connect with. And you never know who's going to feel so grateful because they don't see a lot of stories like yours, because most people like you think that it's not worth talking about. So you can just be one of a kind by doing something that's out of character for you, but it's toward a higher good of, okay, there's going to be 5 to 10 people in the next 2 years that will make or break this company. How do I find them? One by one through cold outreach? That's a strategy. But if you were going to spend 20 hours doing that, you can spend 20 hours sitting down and writing your story about why you're building what you're building and how you got from where you started to here. And that's going to be much more effective, especially because it's evergreen. It keeps paying dividends for years or possibly decades to come. I still get outreach on posts that I wrote once upon a time because people come to it on their own timeline. Sometimes it circulates on little subreddits. Sometimes people search on Google to remember something they read 7 years ago to send to a friend. You never know when it'll come back up. And so I think that also spending the time writing and sharing your personal story and your personal motivations is a way to extend the value of those windows when your head's up to create the connections that will make a difference for your business. It works fast, but it also works long. And most other ways of generating luck and serendipity are very bursty. So sharing your story is one of the longest lasting, slow release ways to manage that.
We have some exciting founders that are going to be coming on the pod, so I'm excited to help them tell their stories too.
Maybe a follow-up there is, do you have any founders in mind that have done a really good job at telling their story? And what are the key ingredients that founders should touch on when sharing their story?
One that comes to mind is a founder that I backed all the way back in 2021 named Lena Colucci, who's just incredible. PhD from MIT and super technical, but also harbor a secret wish to be a vlogger one day. And now she is a vlogger, and her vlogs about her experience doing YC during a pivot are like incredible. But what I love there is that she thought about what format she loves as a member of the audience and then did that format. It doesn't have to be lyrical personal essays. That's for some people and not others. But what's most important in connecting with your people is finding a format that you really like as a viewer, as a reader, and communicating in that format, because there's something extra fun about being able to see yourself in the same lens as the people you spend time with and admire online. She doesn't just vlog. The vlogs are amazing, but also she has a long history of blogging and specifically writing these year-end blog posts about her goals for the year and how it's gone And it's a mix of a window into her broader ambitions, but also some honesty and vulnerability about where things didn't go as planned. And I think that at minimum, if you're like, I can't do this right now, it's not the time, and it's also not me, that sounds hard, just experimenting at the next turn of the calendar year with sending an update about your progress and goals and just a hint of personal honesty about where things haven't gone as planned. First of all, it's the right window of time for reflection. A lot of things quiet down around the end of the year, and maybe you will have a day or two to, go to a cafe or go to the woods and reflect and write in a way you wouldn't have otherwise. But also, it's a time of year that's coordinated. Everyone's in that reflective mode. And also, when the calendar flips over and they're moving toward January, they're in the mode of trying to reconnect with the people who are important to them. And so if you give them an artifact that you publish on whatever platform that reflects on the year that was, it's going to be a perfect way to figure out who was hoping to reconnect with you anyway. That's my extraction from Lena's amazing example to what I think is practical for others.
And a trend that I've noticed maybe in the last 2 years is this trend of CEOs and founders start to build more in public and write more on LinkedIn and get their thoughts out there. Yeah. And I really hope that some product teams start doing that, because I think it really just helps build trust and understand like the care and thoughtfulness that goes behind every product and every decision.
And by the way, I think that's something that founders can really help with as well. As soon as they have even a small team, I'm sure that in this day and age, there's a lot of internal documentation that comes together, and some of it is really good. And also, what do you have to hide? You're a startup. The biggest risk is that you go out of business and are irrelevant. So it's worth taking some risks in order to pursue the larger goal. If you have someone on your team who's writing amazing internal documentation, figuring out how to support them both in the practical details of publishing a version of that and in the emotional process of putting themselves out there and feeling supported is just a game changer for your business, because that's a way to build in public. That's not just, it doesn't all fall on your shoulders as a founder. If there's somebody who has a really great way of articulating the inside of that startup journey, finding a way to empower them to publish it externally, it's sometimes high lift because they really don't want to. And sometimes they've been waiting for somebody to invite them and encourage them to do that. And so you don't know until you try and until you encourage them. But making sure that's a good experience for them, especially with you as a founder, making sure that you send that post around to your investors and your supporters and making a moment of it so that you can at least show your employee how proud you are of them. It looks good on you as a founder as well, because you're able to show a glimpse of the team you've built. And it's not just about you. It should be a little bit about you're the person people are joining. But once it is a little bit about you, making it about the rest of the team as well, I think is a big motivator, and also a just larger, clearer window into what it's really like on the inside.
When I was at Facebook, we saw so much internal writing, and now I'm so happy to see that a lot of that writing has now made its way out. You see Ami Vora, who's the chief product officer at Fair, she's writing a lot on her newsletter. Deb Liu, who's now the CEO at Ancestry, has wrote tons and tons of great posts internally, and she started doing it externally. So I think that your advice is excellent. I think if people have a healthy internal writing culture, it's not that much of a leap to start to write that stuff externally, and people find it super valuable. So I love that
super valuable.
advice.
And also, by the way, it doesn't have to be that coaxed for the public eye. People love primary source material. A friend told me once, and I repeat to myself all day, every day, people love a screenshot of an email. People love the actual literal internal Notion document. They love seeing how you formatted it. They love seeing the little acronyms and call outs. It's fun to see the glimmers of someone else's real day-to-day that haven't been massaged for public consumption. And so think about that. Think about just publishing the internal document with a little bit of framing, but not too much, and just really lowering the threshold for sharing, because I think that when you've got the goods, again, sharing it should be the easy part, but it's a part we so often skip for fear or lack of time or a mix of the two. One's an excuse for the other. Yep. The other thing I'll say there is that kind of internal writing is often coming from somebody who has a passion for self-expression. So you're helping them achieve their goals, and maybe you'll learn more about their goals in life by telling them you really have a knack for this. And just my final plug is, again, for conscientious people who've got the goods, you contributed a lot. You haven't been running all over the planet building your personal brand. Like, you're focused on delivering internally, but you feel like you have something to say and something you're proud of. If you think there's any chance that you're going to leave the company you're at in the next 12 months, one of the highest impact things you can do for your own career that's also additive to the people who made a bet on you in the first place is to take an internal document that you're really proud of and go through the sometimes long process of putting it together for public sharing, getting the alignment to share it publicly on the company channels, not just going rogue, but talking with the founder, talking with the PR team if you have one, like going through those steps. Almost no one goes through those steps because they're afraid to share in the first place. So they're just like, it's another one of their excuses that they're like, oh, I would have to check with her. PR wants you to be building in public. They just want to be in the loop. And so if you can find a way to take one thing you're really proud of, whether that's a retro on a feature launch or it's a PRD that you wrote once upon a time that you think is a fun historical artifact, finding a way to publish that while you're still in seat, while it can be shared on company channels, while it can accrue value to the company and show their amazing product team internally. Doing that, if you think there's some chance you'll leave on good terms, means that you now have this artifact that would have been locked inside the company in public, and you can reference it in the future. You can use it in your own job search. It's good for everyone. It's not you being extractive. It's you making visible a good part of the company that you're at, which is you and your contributions, and also unlocking that for your own future reference, as well as a way of showing other people how you think in seat.
Amazing. Yeah, totally agree. And that's something that I'm trying to get the members of the super community to also feel more comfortable sharing some of their artifacts. I think you can learn so much from what different companies, how they operate, what they value, written versus visual communication. But yeah, now shifting a little bit gears to a related topic is a question that we found ourselves discussing pretty often here in this podcast is, when should founders hire their first PM? What is your perspective in that question?
Yeah. First, I'll say this is not something I had any visibility into as a product person looking for my role at startups. I had no concept that there was a time for your first product hire and not a time. I just thought, oh, I love this company. I want to come add value. Like, why is it not coming together? Sometimes it did come together and those were amazing opportunities, but I never really got that there was a time and a place for everything. Now, as an investor, I get it a lot more because so much of what I look for in the founders I back, we at Matrix lead concept through Series A rounds. I personally focus on B2B SaaS and AI. When we get involved, we lead the round, we join the board. And so it's a very deep relationship with the founders that we back. Also, all of us on the investing team at Matrix are former founders and product leaders. And so that's an experience all of us bring to bear. And it's a lens all of us look through when we figure out what founders we feel aligned with and excited about going on the journey with. And so that product mindset means that a lot of what I'm looking at when I meet founders is, how's their product sense? How do they think about product? How do they make trade-offs? What's their long-term vision? How's their sense for the details? How much do they care about the user that they're building for? And how does that care flow through to the little things, the details that they put in the extra sweat equity to get right, even though it doesn't have an obvious immediate relationship to ROI. So that's a lot of what I'm discussing with them. And they often have product backgrounds, by the way. So I work with product-focused founders, and I'm especially excited when both founders on a two-founder team have that love of product in their background, because I know that it's so powerful to have a thought partner when you're trying to build the right thing for a growing user base. So with that as my lens, I'm able to see if you've got two people with product and eng, maybe design backgrounds on the founding team, and you've got 10 to 15 engineers, probably still don't need your first product hire, because you as the founder are responsible for the survival and the thriving of this business. And you have the background as a product person. And it's very normal for product people, even IC product managers, to be able to partner with 8 to 10 engineers, sometimes 15 at the far end. But also as a founder, you've got some extra juice. You don't have to manage with respect and not authority. Like, you have authority as a founder. So that doesn't mean that the super smart, engaged employees you hired will do everything you tell them to, and you wouldn't want that. But you do have more of a definitive say on what is this company about, and you're able to get people on board with the vision at the hiring stage, instead of the role of a product manager in a much larger organization, which is often operating through influence to get people psyched about building that admin portal that no one's been, able to prioritize for the last few years. It's just a different thing. And so if you think about one or two product focused founders being able to each, support up to 10 to 15 engineers, if it's two, that's until 30 engineers that you've got a clear line of sight. And things will start to break at some point in there, and you might want to bring on somebody who's more of a complement to you as a product leader. But often that first product role does look more like project management because the vision has to be the founders. And as an investor, I can say the vision has to be the founder. That's the test you're running. There's not enough staffing to pursue multiple visions with autonomy and linking it all together with OKRs. That's not possible at the earliest stages. And so really accepting that as somebody who has that broad curiosity and that product skill set in the early days and saying, there's lots of ways to add value, but I shouldn't be looking for that picture perfect product role and expect to be employee number 9. Actually, what I need to accept instead is that the best way to learn and grow, and really the best determinant of success, the thing the best investors are looking for, is that product visionary who also is able to really build it and ship it. And so if you can see from looking at the product and playing with the product yourself that it's the kind of product you'd be proud to work on, that means there's something special about the mind that's behind it that you can learn a lot from if you view yourself as a partner to them. And the beautiful thing is that in the success case, these companies grow, and sooner than later, especially if you have that experience with leading product or being a product leader of any sort in a growing business, if you have that skill set, it's going to become relevant again. And what you're fighting for is the success that makes that relevant. But to answer your question in a much shorter way, I would say that very often it's the Series B where great product founders look for their first product hire. And if you're looking before that, sometimes the actual opportunity is to support the weaknesses of a less strong product founder. And that may not be what you want as somebody who's looking to learn from and partner with the best. Or sometimes they are hiring a product person, but it's important to be realistic that this is really more of a tactical role until the point where the company reaches escape velocity and there's a lot more for you to lead autonomously. And then the way that you view that window from Series A to B, where you're on board as a product person, but you're trying to be a little more patient and accepting of pursuing the founder's vision. The way I'd view that is as a mind meld window, where the best case is that they actually aren't being hands off with you. They're being side by side in the trenches. This is the part of their job that they love. They are almost envious of you because you get to do the part of the job that they are so excited about. You get to work directly with the engineers that they painstakingly hired, and that they also respect your opinion as you gain more context. So I think it's fine to start out without a lot of domain knowledge if you love the product and you love the problem space. But what to watch is, does the founder who's product focused start to change their mind when you bring them information from the domain that they didn't have? When you bring user feedback that they didn't know, that they weren't in the details of, do they brush it off? Or do they listen and get curious about your ideas for how to address it? Those are the early signals I'd look to, even in an interview process, for whether there's a potential for you to operate more autonomously in the long run.
I love that advice. I think it's so spot on. And I've told a few founders in just like the last couple of weeks that they should not hire a first PM, even though they're convinced. And I'm like, you're too early. Like you have to keep running it, get an advisor, get some help. You should keep owning it for now. I'm curious, like when you think about let's say if we advance the clock on the company life cycle to like the Series B, C, maybe even later stage founders that you're working with, you have an interesting point of view into their relationships with their product executives. So maybe that's not the first product hire, but whoever the VP level or the C level. So are there any themes or commonalities that you're seeing for what makes the most healthy, successful CEO relationship with that C-level product person or that VP of product? What makes magic happen in those relationships?
So first I'll say I've been at Matrix for just over 3 years, investing and leading concept through Series A rounds. 3 years is still not a lot of time. So none of my companies are at Series C and none of them are at the point where they would be hiring a VP product, anything like that. So just to call a spade a spade. But because of my product background, I do end up connecting with a lot of product leaders who are curious about how to grow their own careers And because that's something that I was recently in their shoes, and I also have a bird's eye view of the industry, that's something that I really love, engaging in those conversations to try to help them navigate and figure out what's their best next step. And then also, if I'm doing my job right, I'm earning the trust of founders all across the ecosystem, even if they're way beyond where I could invest in, just because everyone can use a sounding board that has knowledge but isn't entangled in the situation. And so that's more the role I play with those Series C founders that I talk to now. Speaking from both sides of that, the conversations with the product executives who are figuring out their next step, and then the later stage founders who are trying to figure out how product flows into their organization. The thing that I see as the great unifier is customer obsession. So often, the path of a founder involves just relentless love for their customers and a lot of emotional labor, actually, to cultivate those early design partners and show them that it's not just another startup that's a lot of talk and no substance, that they're the ones who will listen and really build the breakthrough solutions that are going to make a difference to their customer set. And of course, this is especially true in B2B, but I think that if you don't have a love for your customers, then it's hard to persist over the long run as a founder anyway, even if you're building in consumer. And so because that's a founder's come from, and they've had more of those conversations over the years than anybody if they're doing their jobs right, no one could have that many conversations. Then what they're coming into a relationship with a possible product executive, what they're coming in with is just this deep knowledge base that not only do they know for sure no one could match that, they also feel an anxiety that this new person is going to be more talk than substance and not walk the walk of customer love. And that's part of their protectiveness about handing off any product leadership. It's not easy, but I need to know that you're going to do the same things I would do. You're going to invest in the same emotional labor to connect with the right customers, to get the insights that keep us relevant and build the relationships that keep people giving us chances. Because it's impossible to be perfect, but it is possible to recover from mistakes if you're in deep relationship. And so a product executive coming in, first of all, look at the product and look at the product craft, but don't get distracted by this is a beautiful product. They have a great design team. It would be glamorous to work here because all my friends like the product. If the product serves a customer base that you just don't get along with or you're not interested in, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle to build the right things, but more importantly, as an early warning sign, you're going to struggle to earn the founder's trust because this is the thing they hold most dear. And then how can you prototype that? How can you test that before it's the moment of truth? Well, if you're talking to a company, try doing some user interviews with people who haven't adopted that product yet, but are the ICP. You can ask in your early conversations with the recruiter or with the founder, hey, what's your ICP? What's an ICP that you're curious about, but you're not sure is locked in, that you wish you knew more about because you feel like it might be an opportunity, but you just haven't had the time to go deep on? This is an innocuous question. They'll probably answer it without a second thought. But what you do with that information is what counts. Not just for the interview process, because you can probably make it through regardless. Product people are classically good at talking and thinking on their feet. So you will do well in the interviews because that's what you get practice at all the time. But to know for sure what your prospects are with this company, whether you can take it personally to the degree you need to in order to take a load off the founder and earn their trust, go do 10 user interviews. And if by the end you're excited, great. And you'll have amazing material and an incredible proof point to share in your interviews with that founder. If you are bored, do not continue because this is your life in the good case. And if you can't get into it, it's not for you.
Such good advice.
Yeah. Wow. This has been an incredible conversation. I think our audience is going to find it super valuable. Yeah, maybe two last questions for you, Diana. One is, where can people find you? And then the second one is, how can the audience be helpful to you?
Yeah, so kind. Thank you. Well, quickly, I have a personal site, dianaberlin.com, where it's like the doorway to all things Diana online. I also have now a newsletter on Substack. I wish that these things were more unified, but I think Substack's very keen on building their own network, and I have an acceptance about it. So you can find my weekly newsletter at diagonal.substack.com. And it's just 5 highlights from my research each week. It's a little window into what I'm thinking about. And I love hearing from people who are thinking about the same things. So if you feel like anything in this episode resonated, or if you read anything that I've published that sticks with you, I'd love to hear about it. I read all my emails, so I'm not that hard to find. But also specifically, if you see that there's something that's on my mind and it's on your mind as well, helping me get to the next level of depth by sharing glimpses of your own research or something that you learned the hard way or a conversation you had that changed your mind in that domain recently is just super valuable, because I wish I could know everything, but I can't. The best way for me to learn is to show that I'm serious by doing my own primary source research, and then earn the right to learn from the frontier knowledge that other people are developing on their own, because they share it in good faith. So that's what's most helpful to me.
Amazing. This has been so much fun. Thanks so much, Diana.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Ben.
It's really fun to chat.
Thanks, Dan. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who you think would benefit from it as well. We really appreciate it. We'd also love a follow or a rating on Substack, Spotify, or YouTube. That's going to let other people find us. And if you have any topic recommendations for a future episode, please send myself or Mark a DM on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.